Good evening, everybody. I think we're all here. Yes. I have to count. Yes, everybody's here, except our sleeping yogis. We have two. Hopefully they're sound asleep, getting a great night's sleep in Israel. So we begin the evening together as usual, chanting the refuges and the precepts. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddham saranam gacchami, Dhammam saranam gacchami, Sangham saranam gacchami, Dutiyampi Buddham saranam gacchami, Dutiyampi Dhammam saranam gacchami, Dutiyampi Sangham saranam gacchami, Tatiyampi Buddham saranam gacchami, Tatiyampi Dhammam saranam gacchami, Tatiyampi Sangham saranam gacchami. Panatipata Veramani Sikapadam Samadhiyami Adinadana Veramani Sikapadam Samadhiyami Abrakmacharya Veramani Sikapadam Samadhiyami Musawada Veramani Sikapadam Samadhiyami Sura Meraya Majapamadhatana Veramani Sikapadam Samadhiyami Vikala Bhojana Veramani Sikapadam Samadhiyami Nacha Gita Wadita Visukadasana Malaganda Vilepana Dharana Mandana Vipusanatana Veramani Sikapadam Samadhiyami Uchasayana Mahasayana Veramani Sikapadam Samadhiyami. Idam me silam magapalanyana sa pachayo o tu. And this evening we have a gift again with a Dhamma talk from Kristina.
I was thinking to myself when Marcia was talking about her equanimity test yesterday that this must be my equanimity test, sitting here and giving a Dhamma talk to all of you. Anyway, I'm feeling very so happy to have the opportunity. to be here and share Dhamma with you. So I'm going to be talking about the Brahma Vihara of equanimity. So as I was first preparing for this talk, I was really letting different words and different images come to mind. And there were several words that came up, such as inner balance, non-reactivity, radical acceptance. I also had this image of a big tree with deep roots going into the ground and branches reaching up in all directions. And this big tree was sort of swaying gently from side to side, but the roots was really keeping it very grounded. And then I had an image of a rolly-tolly toy. So this is the type of toy that often small children would play with. And it's a kind of toy that if you sort of knock it over to one side, right away it's going to come up. It's going to bounce back into balance again. So you may all have seen this type of toy. So each of these words and images describes qualities and aspects of equanimity. And yet for me, the word that kept coming up was the word peaceful. So this summer, I had the opportunity to complete a long self-retreat under the guidance of Marcia. And one of the practices that I did was the 4 Brahma Viharas, one by one, practicing them one at a time. And when I got to equanimity, there was really a deepening sense of peace as I started saying the classical equanimity phrases for myself and for other beings. There was this deep bodily and mental sense of coming to an inner alignment, neither leaning forward nor leaning backwards, nor leaning to either side. A settling into like what felt like a center line. And then in this place of center, the mind could come to a deep place of rest. But the rest was still relaxed, but it was also very wakeful and clear, without any sense of strain. What I noticed about this state was that there was a sense of release. And it was a release of even the slightest leaning in any direction. So there was no leaning into the future. There was no leaning away from the future. There was no leaning away from the past, or no leaning into the past. Another way to describe the state of equanimity is as a sense of bodily and mental spaciousness. So the Buddha used the image of the mind as a vast sky to describe this very centered, spacious feeling. And this is from the Majjhima Nikaya. Develop a mind that is vast like space, where experiences, both pleasant and unpleasant, can appear and disappear without conflict, struggle, or harm. Rest in a mind vast like sky. So there's yet another image that also helps to describe a quality of equanimity, and this is that of an open palm. This palm neither tightens and it doesn't throw anything away either. It sort of just steadily receives experience. So we may not notice any discomfort if our fist is very tight, but what we might notice is that when we slowly release this hand, then we might notice a sense of ease. So this is not actually, the discomfort might be noticed, may not be noticed in the tightness. It's not before the release happens that we may notice that, oh, this is actually more easeful to release this tightening. So this image of an open hand can be particularly useful as we explore the relational quality of equanimity. So this open, receptive hand can be an image of how we intend to meet other people with equanimity. We're present and open to receive them, just holding them steadily with this open hand. We don't all of a sudden close our fist around them, and also we don't all of a sudden throw them away or drop them. So as Marcia talked about yesterday, the proximate cause of the equanimity of Brahmavihara is to understand that we're all owners of our own karma. And this is from the Visuddhimagga. Equanimity is characterized as promoting the aspect of neutrality towards beings. Its function is to see equality in beings. It is manifested as the quieting of resentment and approval. Its proximate cause is seeing ownership of deeds, of karma. And so in our practice, we continually repeat the phrases, I am the heir of my own karma. My happiness and my suffering depends upon my own actions of mind, of body and speech, and not upon my wishes for myself. And you are the heir of your karma. Your happiness and suffering depends upon your actions of mind, body, and speech, and not upon my wishes for you or your own wishes for yourself. So I think, as we've all seen, at least for parts of our practice, is that our happiness and suffering truly is not based on our wishes for ourselves. States of happiness and suffering are based upon how we meet each present moment experience. I think we've all seen to some extent that if we cling to pleasant experiences, then we suffer. If we push away unpleasant experiences, we suffer. And if we tune out, we also suffer. And I think we've also seen that that when we have moments of being able to meet each moment with a mindful and non-reactive awareness, then in that moment there is a potential for peace. There is a potential for release. So with these equanimity phrases, we are essentially reminding ourselves of the core Buddhist teachings around the lawful causes of suffering and happiness. In some way, we are calling upon our own accumulated wisdom. And we're calling upon what each of us has come to understand from our own practice about causes of suffering and what supports the end of suffering. And so, based in wisdom, we invite ourselves to let go of our reactivity, and metaphorically, we invite ourselves to open the palms of our hand. There is the potential for this attitude of non-reactivity to strengthen and deepen and grow through our Brahmavihara practice, through the equanimity practice. And over time, it may develop into a much more stable sense of inner balance, a deep sense of equanimity. So when we cultivate equanimity as a Brahmavihara practice, yesterday Marcia talked of different types of equanimity and how they show in different ways in our practice. But in this particular practice, we are cultivating equanimity as a Brahmavihara, and we are specifically using our relationships with other beings as our practice ground. And we probably all felt that it's in our relationships that we most easily fall out of balance. At least I know that for myself. I don't know if you can recognize that. So in our relationships, our patterns of clinging and aversion and tuning out may show up the most clearly. Especially in our very close relationships, there can be deep patterns of attachment and clinging. And I think sometimes we're not even aware of the tight holding, of the tight grip we have before there's an outer circumstance where there's a shift. And this shift forces us to become aware of this tight holding that we have in the relationship. So we may be faced with a significant change, a loss in the relationship, and we may then experience sadness, anger, or despair. So like many other parents of teenage children, I went through a period of great emotional difficulty when my now adult son was moving into becoming a teenager. And as he should, he started to pull away mentally and physically from our connection and devoting more time with his friends. This was all good. And although it was a totally natural process, I was somehow not prepared emotionally. And what became really clear was that I actually had a deep attachment to the pleasant feeling that I was having from our connection, my sense of closeness with him. And so I really suffered when that closeness changed. And in this reactive, confused state, I tried different things to try to pull him back in again. And as you may imagine, this led to a lot of tension in our connection. And the more I tried to pull him in subtle and not so subtle ways, the more he pulled back. And then eventually it did become clear that this clinging I was having was causing pain for both of us. It was leading to separation, and it was leading to distrust. So everything opposite of what I really wanted. So there was a beginning understanding that he had his own path, his own karma, and that I had to let him make his own choices. I really had to let him live his own life. And there really was nothing else to do than to release the grip, to release the clinging that I had. And it really was like slowly opening the palm of my hand and releasing that tight grip. And as I did that, then I noticed another impulse. And this was an impulse to pull my hand back. It was sort of like, if you don't want to spend time with me, I don't want to spend time with you either. So it was unpleasant for me to feel that rejection. And then my mind reacted to the unpleasant with aversion and resentment. So as the Buddha taught us, clinging and aversion are really two sides of the same coin. Sometimes it's more the clinging side that shows of the coin, and sometimes it may be more of the aversive side that shows. And yet for this relationship to grow, I really had to come into a place of equanimity, of balance, and open my hand so that I could be receptive and equanimous with our relationship. And initially, that was really painful and frightening. But eventually, there was a deep sense of relief following the letting go. And as you can imagine, the relationship really greatly improved as I did that. So I think sometimes as we practice with the phrases, that we set the intention to open our tight hand and become more non-reactive in our close relationships, there can be a process of letting go. It's like first we must really recognize the tension and the pain involved with the tight attitude we have. And then in that seeing the pain that's causing both for ourselves and for other people, then there might be this understanding that then invites us to slowly open. But in the slowly opening, there may actually be layers of sadness and grief that we have to feel, or there may be layers of resentment and anger. And there really is no hurrying up of this process. So everything in nature has its own rhythm of opening and closing, expanding and resting, and so does the heart. So part of the heart opening process is learning to listen to these rhythms of the heart. No forcing, no pushing, but inviting this release when there's a readiness to do so. So again, this is just an invitation to maybe bring into this equanimity practice if some of these reactive patterns are showing up for you, to bring a patience and acceptance with it. So I'd like to talk a little bit about how equanimity can strengthen, stabilize, and support the other Brahma Viharas of mudita, sympathetic joy, metta, loving kindness, and karuna, compassion. So while we do practice with them individually in our meditation, strengthen them individually one by one, in daily life, they all play together. So you could think about it like a quartet of different instruments. They each have a different sound, a different rhythm. And first we get to know each instrument really well, but then they can come together and really play beautiful music. And I apologize, I'm not a musician, so I know we have musicians here, so I may not really speak in a musician language. But we can think about equanimity maybe as the bass tone of wisdom in this quartet. So this bass tone gives stability and depth to the other Brahma Viharas. And it's from this bass tone that we can play all the other instruments without getting out of balance. So the monk and scholar Venerable Nyon Ponikathera has explored this relationship between equanimity and the other Brahma Viharas. And I'd like to use a little bit of time to explore some of his writings. And the way I like to do it is to read a little section, and then I'll do a little reflection on it. And so we'll move through it really slowly. And I'm just going to invite you to listen with mindfulness and see what comes up for you as I start reading his text. So he starts by saying, equanimity, rooted in insight, is the guiding and restraining power for the other three sublime states. It points out to them the direction they have to take and sees to it that this direction is followed. So this is in my words. So because equanimity is rooted in insight, it gives perspective and direction to the other Brahma Viharas. So equanimity understands that while good wishes and good intentions and good actions are beneficial for all beings, it is really only through insight into the true causes of suffering and the true sources of happiness that there can be a potential for a deeper peace. So as part of our loving wishes for all being, we may hold an even deeper wish that we all find our way to deeper understanding and deeper peace, knowing that only wisdom can really set us free. And then he goes on to talk about mudita, or sympathetic joy. Equanimity, being a vigilant self-control for the sake of the final goal, does not allow sympathetic joy to rest content with humble results, forgetting the real aims we have to strive for. So in my words, so while mudita does rejoice in the good fortune and happiness of others and ourselves, when there's the base of equanimity, we don't get lost in this joyous state, thinking, oh, now we've got it, oh, now you've got it, it will be like this forever. We do remember impermanence and the law of change. And just like despair, states of despair comes and goes, so states of happiness comes and goes. And this knowing really helps to stabilize our joy, not to limit it or control it, but just again, it stabilizes it. So there's that balance. And then he goes on to say about metta. Equanimity, which means even-mindedness, gives to love an even, unchanging firmness and loyalty. It endows it with the great virtue of patience. So in my words, one could say that with the support of equanimity, metta becomes truly impartial, not easily seduced by particular preferences we have for certain people or particular moods we're in. With this backdrop of equanimity, our dedication to offer metta to all beings at all times becomes really steady, very firm, and very patient. So again, a balancing that really can support metta. And then he says about compassion. Equanimity furnishes compassion with an even, unwavering courage and fearlessness, enabling it to face the awesome abyss of misery and despair, which confronts boundless compassion again and again. To the active side of compassion, equanimity is the calm and firm hand led by wisdom, indispensable to those who want to practice the difficult art of helping others. And here again, equanimity means patience, the patient devotion to the work of compassion. So in my words, so with this backdrop of equanimity, when our compassion arises in the face of suffering, So when we meet someone who has a hard time, and there's compassion for them that arises, this compassion is not felt as overwhelming or despairing, because the backdrop in the background, we know that joys and sorrows, ups and downs are all part of life. We won't escape it. We're all going to move through this. So compassion based in wisdom can give us the courage to meet suffering again and again, doing the best that we can to relieve it, simply opening to it and being with it, even if it can't be relieved. So again, it gives it the stability and support for the heart to really fully open to it without getting very overwhelmed by suffering. So a few years ago, I had the opportunity to be the primary caregiver for my grandmother through her sickness and dying process. So my mom had passed away some years before, so I was the only caregiver for her. And I always experienced my grandmother as very strong and independent and kind. She was a retired social worker and had worked within the social justice system her whole life. So she was always ready to support others with kindness and compassion and a lot of wisdom. But one thing that I actually never got to see very clearly, but I sort of knew it was in the background, was that she had a hard time receiving support from others. Relying on others was very difficult. So this deeper pattern that she had of being very self-sufficient became very clear at the end of her life when she needed care and needed help. So as her granddaughter, I saw her move from being this very calm, stable person to all of a sudden be expressing a lot of fear, a lot of confusion, a lot of sadness. And she had to be in a hospice setting, and she was really fearful about being in that setting, not knowing, didn't want people to move her around, didn't want people to help her feed her, dress her, and was just in a lot of despair around it. But in other moments, she would totally switch, and she would forget about being afraid. And then she would be fully in the moment, just enjoying the beautiful view of the treetops from her room, smiling and laughing at the staff. And then the next moment, she would cry again, asking what's happening to me, what's wrong with me, when can I go home? So through these months, I really got to put my Brahma Vihara practice into action. She had been the primary caregiver for me through my life, so there was a lot of love for her. And what I noticed was that I did feel a lot of care for her. I did feel a lot of compassion for her. And I also felt a lot of joy for her in the moments when she felt joyful. But in the background, there really was this sense of equanimity that helped me see that this was really her journey, her karma, this state of mind, this confused, fearful state of mind she was in was part of her path. And there was nothing I could really do to take that away from her. It was her karma. So although I had known her to be calm and steady my whole life, it was clear that under these changed circumstances, this really activated this other pattern in her mind. And the Buddha might have said that the fear was the karma fruit of a deeper distrustful attitude of mind that was coming into fruition through under these different conditions. So as a caregiver, there was nothing else to do than to breathe with her, hold her hand when she was lucid, embrace her and rock her when she felt scared, and laugh with her when she felt happy. So really, she was switching really quickly, and I had to just switch with her and just be with her in all those different states. So with all these ups and downs in the last week of her life, she did seem to be in a place of ease at the very last moments of her life. And as her breathing was getting labored and shallow, my adult son and I were sitting by her bedside, and we were actually laughing and telling stories about his childhood and how she would care for him, and they would play games together and do puzzles together. And with this, with us laughing and talking about all of that, there was a deep peace that sort of moved over her, and her whole system seemed to be relaxing. So she did seem to be in a state of ease at her last breath. So again, changing conditions. So this experience strengthened my confidence that with the backdrop of equanimity, our hearts can actually fully open and respond to whatever state another being is expressing, without feeling overwhelmed and without tuning out. So wisdom teaches us that we are ultimately not responsible for others, and this can give our care an element of lightness, fluidity, and spaciousness. Wisdom also teaches us that we're all subject to the ups and downs of life, the 10,000 sorrows and the 10,000 joys. So because we all share this human condition, this experience, there can be this natural calling to respond to each other from a place of heartfulness. And this is part of what we get to really practice with these Brahma Viharas, is how to respond to others fluidly and from a state of heartfulness. So this equanimity, as I said in the beginning of the talk, has a basis in wisdom, and Marcia mentioned that several times yesterday as well. And it also has the potential of further strengthening our wisdom. So it's based in wisdom, but it also strengthens our ongoing development of wisdom. So in a retreat like this, we really get to deepen the state of non-reactivity and open-handedness. We get to, through the phrases, we get to really feel the state and really sort of like dive into the state. And then over time, it can become a new reference point for us as we move on with our lives and into our relational worlds. And this reference points can give us a much better ability to then notice and see when suffering is arising. So again, with the tight hand I talked about, we may not notice the suffering when the hand is tight, but if the hand has opened, then when it starts tightening again, then we will notice it. So it can really give another reference point that can support us in knowing the arising and suffering, and also an invitation then to release it if we can. So as I mentioned in one of the instructions given a few days ago, the teacher Gil Fonsdale I think he says it jokingly. It sounds like that way to me. But he says that one of the benefits of our Brahmavihara practice is that we actually practice setting other people free from us, if that makes sense. So by working with our own reactivity, we set them free from us. And this was certainly true for my son. So I think he felt a great relief when his mother released that hand and sort of let him lead his own life. So I think that's funny and an interesting way of looking at it. But I want to add as well that I also think that we are freeing ourselves from ourselves. Or said in other words, we're freeing ourselves from the heavy sense of me, mine, and I that arise alongside with our reactive patterns. So in our reactivity, there's just a lot of self-making. There's a lot of contraction around a sense of a self. So as we become less involved with our own inner drama, our self-making project, there is a freeing up of energy. And this energy that was tied up in this me, mine, I want, I don't want this, can now flow out and fully meet each moment and all the beings that we encounter. So in the absence of the contraction of I, me, and mine, there can be a more fluid dance where the heart spontaneously responds to other beings according to their unique needs and their unique situation. So in the beginning of the Dhamma talk, I mentioned the roly-poly doll. And there is this new fad in China where dancers will get on top of a big, heavy balancing base. And they're dressed in these beautiful Chinese traditional outfits. And what they'll do is that they will, from that base, they're able to sway back and forth, coming back to balance, but swaying in different directions. And they can also swirl around on this base. And when they perform, these dancers, they're performing within a circle of an audience. And what they'll do is they will, so the audience will, someone in the audience will call their attention. And then this dancer will maybe swirl around and bend over here to offer a smile or a hand, or swirl around and bend in that direction and offer, a more serious eye contact. But anyway, what they do is that they will dance and constantly be in movement, responding to whatever is coming up from the audience. And what's interesting about this balance, right? So they have this like really deep sense of balance. They always sort of come back to balance. Is that the deeper the balance, the deeper the bend, if that makes sense. So the more there's this, again, the stability, the more we can actually reach out to other beings, and we're not afraid of falling, and we can sort of just pop back into balance. As equanimity strengthens as a base for the other Brahma Viharas, it really does allow for this deeper bending into connection with life and into connection with other people. Just like the roly-poly dancer, bending, spiraling, swaying in one fluid motion. So I thought here at the end, to bring this alive, we may all of us have had moments or situations in our life where we have felt like the roly-poly doll, even for short periods of time. Maybe there's also people in your life that you can bring to mind that has this sense of fluidity and this heart that can open in many directions. I know for myself, having had the honor of sitting this retreat with all of you and learning from Marcia, I've had a chance to sit in on all the interviews. And I know you haven't been able to see Marcia bending and swaying and responding through the interviews, but I've had the honor of really seeing her very quickly attend to whatever was arising in the interview, whatever emotion was there, meeting that, coming back, and then the next interview. And it's just been an inspiration to see this sort of live roly-poly doll. So you may know this from yourself, or you may think of people in your life that can sort of embody this for you. And I actually wanted to invite us into a little bit of maybe just an experiment or a little bit of a practice now. So maybe finding your center, sitting down on your seat, and if you're leaning back, I'm going to invite you to maybe come up on your sit bones, so that both your sit bones are connected to what you're sitting on. And maybe feeling the sense of the spine sort of supporting you upwards. And the base of your, maybe your legs or your way that you're sitting and your feet on the ground. And as you find that base, I'm going to invite you to sort of connect with that sense of a base. Maybe at the same time, you can also feel the fluidity. Maybe like that doll, or maybe like the tree, if that's a better image for you. And while connecting with this maybe There can be a sense of a center line or a sense of like feeling very grounded, yet there's fluidity. You may experiment with saying the phrases, the equanimity phrases for yourself, whichever ones that are best for you. And if there's any tightening coming up in the body, possibly inviting the shoulders to come down, feeling the strength of the center, the support of the base of your body. And maybe you can notice as breathing is moving through the body, that the body does move. Maybe it does sway a little bit with the breath, just very slightly, maybe not so much. And then maybe noticing the sense of coming a little bit out of balance and coming back into balance, coming back into center. So this was just a little experiment to possibly connect with also an embodied sense of stability. Thank you very much for your kind attention. May your practice be of benefit to yourself and to all beings.
We'll close the evening together, chanting the sharing of blessings. Through the goodness that arises from my practice, may my spiritual teachers and guides of great virtue, my mother, my father, and my relatives, the sun and the moon, and all virtuous leaders of the world, may all the highest gods and evil forces, celestial beings, guardian spirits of the earth, and the Lord of death, may those who are friendly, indifferent, or hostile, may all beings receive the blessings of my life. May they soon attain the threefold bliss and realize the deathless through the goodness that arises from my practice. And through this act of sharing, may all desires and attachments quickly cease, and all harmful states of mind, until I realize Nibbana in every kind of birth. May I have an upright mind with mindfulness and wisdom, austerity and vigor. May the forces of delusion not take hold, nor weaken my resolve. The Buddha is my excellent refuge. Unsurpassed is the protection of the Dhamma. The solitary Buddha is my noble guide. The Sangha is my supreme support. Through the supreme power of all these, may darkness and delusion be dispelled. So gathering together again in a little less than an hour, the last group sit of the day.